The process server handed me the envelope with a polite smile. Inside was a petition to declare me mentally incompetent and seize my house. Signed by my own daughter. I stood on the porch of my lakeside home in New Hampshire, the late autumn wind cutting through my cashmere cardigan. The envelope felt heavier than it should. My name, Eleanor Voss, printed in crisp legal font across the top. Petitioner, Cassandra Voss Harrington. Co-petitioner, Derek Harrington. Grounds, cognitive decline, inability to manage affairs, risk of financial self-harm. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply closed the door, walked back to the kitchen, and poured another cup of Earl Grey. The steam rose in slow curls. Outside, the lake glittered cold and indifferent under a steel gray sky. 20 minutes later, I sat at the oak dining table that had witnessed 30 family Thanksgivings. I opened the petition again. Page 3 listed the assets they wanted control of. This house, purchased outright in 1998 with my late husband's life insurance and my own savings. The trust fund I had quietly built to $4.7 million over decades. Even the small investment account I used for property taxes and maintenance. The reason they gave was almost poetic in its cruelty. The respondent has exhibited erratic behavior, including refusal to sell the family lake house to assist her daughter in acquiring a $6.8 million penthouse in Manhattan, despite repeated requests and clear financial capacity. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I laughed once, a short, dry sound that echoed off the beams. Cassie had always been dramatic. At 42, she still styled herself as the elegant lifestyle influencer who taught her 187,000 subscribers the art of quiet luxury. Her latest video, posted 3 days ago, was titled, "When Your Mom Finally Says Yes to Your Dream Home." In it, she smiled at the camera in her cream cashmere turtleneck, hair perfectly blown out, and said, "Mom is finally helping us secure the life we deserve." Sometimes family has to step up. I opened my laptop and watched it again. The comments were full of heart emojis and "so wholesome" remarks. No one knew the camera had been rolling while I told her no, calmly, over the phone 2 weeks earlier. No one knew I had reminded her that the trust was structured with strict spendthrift provisions, exactly to prevent impulsive real estate purchases. I closed the laptop. The first call I made was to Richard Langford, my attorney in Manchester. He had handled my husband's estate 15 years ago and still sent me a Christmas card every year with a handwritten note. "Ellie," he said when he picked up, voice steady. "I just saw the filing. They moved fast." "How fast?" I asked. "Hearing is scheduled in 21 days. They filed under seal, claiming urgency due to your alleged decline. They've already requested a temporary conservator." I stared at the petition. "They want to put me in a nursing home next, don't they?" "Not yet, but the petition asks for full guardianship over person and property. If granted, they control everything." I took a slow breath. "Richard, I need you to pull every bank statement, every wire transfer, every canceled check from the last 25 years. I kept copies. All of them." He paused. "That's a lot of paper." "Good. Because I want receipts for every dollar I ever gave that girl. Every tuition payment, every wedding expense, every down payment on their first 3 homes, every monthly allowance after Derek's bonuses mysteriously dried up." Richard's tone shifted. "You thinking counter-petition?" "I'm thinking war," I said quietly, "but the kind that leaves no fingerprints, only numbers." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window overlooking the dark lake and remembered the day Cassie turned 16. She had hugged me and whispered, "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you the way you take care of me." I had believed her. Now she wanted to take everything. The next morning I drove to Manchester.
Richard's office smelled of lemon polish and old leather. He spread the petition across the conference table like a battle map. They're alleging you refused to sell the house even though it's underutilized and you live alone. They claim you've become reclusive, stopped attending family events, and made irrational financial decisions, such as donating $250,000 last year to the local wildlife conservancy without consulting them. I raised an eyebrow. That donation was from my personal account, not the trust. Exactly. But they're painting a picture of declining capacity. Derek's firm even provided an affidavit from one of their in-house psychologists who reviewed your social media. You haven't posted in 8 months. I don't have social media, I said. Precisely. They call that withdrawal. I leaned back. What do we need? A medical evaluation from 3 independent doctors, full forensic accounting of every transfer you ever made to them, and proof that the trust was designed with you as sole trustee for a reason. I slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were meticulously organized spreadsheets I had kept since Cassie was in college. Column A, date. Column B, amount. Column C, purpose. Column D, loan or gift. Every entry after 2015 had been reclassified by Cassie in her own private ledger as a loan with 5% compounded interest. Richard flipped through the pages. His whistle was low. She kept her own books? Apparently, and she charged me interest on money I gave her. He looked up. This is leverage, Ellie. Real leverage. We spent 4 hours drafting the response. By the time I left, the sun was setting over the bare trees. I drove home slowly, the petition sitting on the passenger seat like a coiled snake. When I pulled into the driveway, another car was already there. A sleek black Range Rover with New York plates. Cassie stepped out first, wearing a camel coat that cost more than my annual property tax. Derek followed, tall and polished, the kind of man who smiled with his teeth, but never his eyes. "Mom," Cassie said, voice honeyed, "we need to talk." I unlocked the front door without answering. They followed me inside. The living room smelled of pine logs and the faint lavender sachets I kept in the drawers. I didn't offer them seats. Cassie glanced around as if appraising the space for the first time. This house is too big for one person. The taxes alone are brutal. We could sell it, get you a lovely condo near us in the city. You'd be closer to Lila, too. Lila, my granddaughter, 19 years old and already fluent in designer labels and passive-aggressive texts. Derek cleared his throat. Look, Eleanor, the petition isn't personal. It's protective. We've noticed changes. The confusion with the bills last quarter. The way you keep forgetting names. I forgot the name of your new yacht club once, I said evenly. That was 6 months ago. He smiled tightly. It's cumulative. We're worried. I walked to the sideboard and poured myself a finger of scotch. I didn't offer them any. You filed to have me declared incompetent, I said. You want my house. You want the trust. You want control of money I earned and saved while you were busy curating your perfect life. Cassie's eyes widened in practiced innocence. Mom, that's not fair. We only want what's best. What's best for whom? I asked. Derek stepped forward. We have a buyer lined up for this place. Cash offer, 1 million. After closing costs and your new condo, you'd still have plenty, and we'd make sure you're comfortable. I took a sip. The scotch burned pleasantly. Comfortable in a place I didn't choose, with money you control. Cassie reached for my arm. I stepped back. Mom, please. The hearing is soon.
If you just sign a voluntary conservatorship, we can avoid all the ugliness. Think of Lila. She's devastated by this. I almost laughed again. Instead, I set the glass down. Get out of my house. Cassie's face flickered. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw the calculation underneath. You're making this harder than it has to be. Derek placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll see you in court, Eleanor. They left. The Range Rover's tires crunched over the gravel. I watched the taillights disappear down the lane. Then I went to my study, opened the safe, and pulled out the original trust documents. Page after page of my careful handwriting from 22 years ago. Irrevocable provisions. Spendthrift clause. Sole trustee until my death or voluntary resignation. I sat down and began highlighting every line that would become a weapon. The next 14 days blurred into a rhythm of quiet fury. I met with 3 separate doctors. Each one conducted hours of cognitive testing. Memory, executive function, financial literacy. I passed every test with margins that made the evaluators raise their eyebrows. I hired a forensic accountant who specialized in family disputes. She pored over the statements and produced a 187-page report showing that between 2004 and 2025, I had transferred $3.84 million to Cassie and Derek in various forms. Not $1 had ever been repaid. Not one had been recorded as a gift on their tax returns. I reviewed security footage from the house. The camera at the front door had captured their visit, their expressions when they thought I wasn't looking. I spoke with Richard every afternoon. We built the counter-petition like a cathedral, stone by stone. On the morning of day 19, a courier delivered a thick envelope from Cassie's attorney. Inside was a new motion, asking the court to freeze all my accounts pending the hearing. Attached were affidavits from 3 of Cassie's friends claiming I had seemed disoriented at last year's holiday party. I read them slowly. Then I picked up the phone and called the one person I had been saving for last. Her name was Margaret Whitlock. She had been my assistant for 12 years before I retired. Sharp, loyal, and now running her own small wealth advisory firm in Boston. "Ellie," she said when she answered. "I heard." Of course she had. "I need the full transaction history on the Centurion card I gave Cassie when she turned 30, I said. "Every charge, every statement, and I need it yesterday." Margaret didn't ask why. "I'll have it scanned and encrypted by tonight." That evening, I sat at the kitchen island with a glass of red wine and opened the files she sent. The card had no limit. Cassie had used it like oxygen. 14,700 at Bergdorf Goodman in one afternoon. 8,200 at a wellness retreat in Aspen. 23,000 on a content creation setup that included a ring light and a custom wardrobe. Month after month, year after year. I highlighted the charges in red. Then I created a new spreadsheet titled simply Evidence. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep again. I walked down to the dock and stood under the cold stars. The lake was black glass. My breath fogged in the air. I thought about the day Cassie was born, how I had held her tiny body and promised myself I would give her everything I never had. Security, opportunity, love without conditions. Somewhere along the way, that promise had been twisted into entitlement. I whispered to the water. I kept my promises. You broke yours. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse in a charcoal pantsuit and pearls. No makeup except a touch of lipstick. I wanted to look exactly like what I was. A woman who had run numbers for decades and knew how to read a balance sheet better than most attorneys. Richard met me in the hallway. "They brought a psychologist. We have 3. This is going to be ugly." I adjusted my cuff. "Good." We entered the courtroom.
Cassie and Derek sat at the petitioner's table, dressed like they were attending a charity gala. Lila was there too, eyes downcast, scrolling on her phone. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, called the case. Cassie's attorney stood first. His voice was smooth, practiced. He painted me as fragile, confused, a once capable woman now slipping. He cited the petition. He cited the affidavits. He asked the court to appoint an emergency conservator to protect me from myself. Richard rose next. He didn't raise his voice. He simply began presenting documents. First, the independent medical evaluations. All 3 doctors testified via affidavit that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment. My financial literacy score was in the 98th percentile for my age group. Then, the forensic report. Page after page of transfers. The reclassification as loans. The interest calculations Cassie had applied to gifts. The courtroom grew very quiet. Richard saved the Centurion card statements for last. He projected selected charges on the screen. A $47,000 bachelorette weekend in Tulum when Cassie was already married. A $19,500 diamond tennis bracelet purchased the same week Derek claimed their joint account was tight. Derek's face remained composed, but a muscle ticked in his jaw. Cassie's attorney tried to object. The judge overruled him. When Richard finished, he turned to the petitioner's table. Your Honor, the evidence shows not incapacity on the part of my client, but a calculated attempt to seize assets by manufacturing a narrative. This is not protection. This is predation. The judge asked if the petitioners wished to respond. Cassie stood. Her voice trembled just enough to sound vulnerable.
Mom, we only wanted to help. You've been so isolated. We were scared for you.
I looked at her across the courtroom. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not anger, not yet. Just the clean, sharp pain of recognition. Then I stood. Your Honor, I said, voice steady, may I address the court? The judge nodded. I didn't speak to the judge. I spoke to my daughter. Cassandra, you posted a video telling the world I had agreed to help you buy a $6.8 million penthouse. You smiled while you said it. You never mentioned the part where I said no. You never mentioned the trust provisions that prevent exactly this kind of leveraged purchase. You never mentioned that I've been paying your property taxes, your insurance, and your daughter's tuition for 4 years while you told your followers you were self-made. I paused. The silence was absolute. Every dollar I ever gave you is documented. Every single one. You turned gifts into loans in your private ledger so you could justify taking more. You filed this petition while I was still paying for Lila's semester abroad in Milan. You smiled for the camera and called it family love. My voice never rose. You wanted my house. You wanted my trust. You wanted to put me in a position where I had to beg you for spending money in my own retirement, all while you drove a car worth more than most people's homes and posted about gratitude. I looked at Derek, and you, the man who once told me at Thanksgiving, the blood is thicker than water, right before asking for another bridge loan on your failing deal. You signed the petition, too. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I am not confused. I am not declining. I am simply no longer willing to be the ATM with a heartbeat. I respectfully ask that this petition be dismissed with prejudice. And I ask that the court consider sanctions for filing in bad faith. I sat down. The judge looked at Cassie and Derek for a long moment. Then she spoke. The petition is denied. The request for conservatorship is dismissed. Counsel for the petitioners will provide the court with a written explanation within 14 days regarding the basis for filing. This matter is closed. The gavel came down. Cassie's face went white. Derek stared straight ahead, lips pressed thin. I gathered my coat and walked out without looking back. In the hallway, Richard shook my hand. "You did well." "I did what was necessary," I said. Outside, the November air tasted clean. I stood on the courthouse steps and watched my daughter and her husband emerge. Cassie was crying now, real tears, the kind that smear mascara. Derek had his arm around her, but his eyes were scanning for cameras, for anyone who might recognize them. Lila trailed behind, looking smaller than her 19 years. They saw me. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Cassie took a step forward. "Mom?" I raised one hand, not in anger, just enough to stop her. "Don't," I said quietly. "Not here. Not ever again." I turned and walked to my car. As I drove away from the courthouse, the lake waited for me, patient and deep. I rolled down the window and let the cold air fill the cabin. I had won the first battle. But I knew, with the same certainty I once brought to balance sheets, that this was only the beginning. Because people like Cassie and Derek don't stop when the court says no. They simply look for another way in. And I was ready. I opened the envelope slowly that night, the thick manila folder containing the full forensic report and the judge's order. What I found inside would change everything. The next 14 days blurred into a rhythm of quiet fury, but I never let it show on the surface. I woke each morning at 5:30, made coffee in the French press, and sat at the kitchen island with my spreadsheets open. The numbers never lied. They were the only honest thing left in this mess. Richard called every afternoon at 3. His voice stayed calm, almost clinical, the way good attorneys speak when they know the knife is already at the enemy's throat. "Ellie, the temporary freeze motion was denied this morning. Your accounts remain untouched." But they filed an interlocutory appeal. They're arguing the judge didn't give enough weight to the family's concern. I sipped my coffee. How much time does that buy them? 3 to 6 weeks if we push back hard. I already filed our opposition with the appellate court. Attached every medical report and the full transaction history. I glanced at the lake through the window. A lone loon drifted across the gray water. Good. Keep pushing. I want every day they waste costing them something. That afternoon, I drove to the small bank branch in town. The manager, Mrs. Ellison, had known me for 20 years. She met me in her office with a concerned frown. "Mrs. Voss, I received a notice from an attorney in Boston requesting information on all your accounts. They cited a pending conservatorship matter." I placed the court order on her desk. "This should clarify things. The petition was dismissed. No conservatorship exists. If anyone contacts you again, direct them to Richard Langford." She nodded slowly. "I'll flag the file, but your daughter called yesterday. She sounded upset, said you were refusing help." I smiled without warmth. "Help is a word that means different things to different people, Mrs. Ellison. In my dictionary, it doesn't include filing legal papers to take my house." I left the bank with fresh statements for every account. Back home, I spread them across the dining table like a war room. Red ink for every transfer to Cassie. Blue for every repayment that never came. By midnight, I had highlighted $3.84 million in outflows. Not gifts in their eyes. Investments, apparently. Investments that now demanded a return in the form of my entire net worth. The following week, Derek tried a different approach. He sent a courier with a thick envelope marked Personal Confidential. Inside was a proposed settlement agreement.
In exchange for dropping all further legal action, I would voluntarily place the lake house into a revocable trust, naming Cassie and Lila as remainder beneficiaries. I would also agree to an annual distribution of $180,000 from the main trust to ensure family harmony. I read it twice, then fed it into the shredder. The machine's low hum sounded almost satisfied. That same evening, Cassie called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Mom," she began, voice soft and trembling. "I saw the judge's order. I'm so sorry. Derek pushed the whole thing. I was scared for you, that's all. Can we please talk? Just us?" I stood by the window watching snow begin to dust the pine trees. "Talk about what, Cassandra?" "About fixing this. About being a family again. Lila misses you terribly. She keeps asking why Grandma won't answer her texts." I let the silence stretch. Lila's texts consist of links to penthouse listings and heart emojis. That's not missing me. That's missing my checkbook. Cassie's breath hitched. "That's not fair. She's only 19. 19 is old enough to know the difference between love and leverage," I replied. "You taught her that lesson yourself." She started crying then, soft, practiced sobs. "Mom, please, we're bleeding money on legal fees. Derek's bonus was deferred again." The penthouse deal fell through because the seller heard about the court case. "We're drowning." I closed my eyes. For one treacherous second, I felt the old pull, the mother's instinct to fix, to rescue. Then I remembered the petition, the signatures, the video where she smiled and lied to the world. "Drowning," I repeated. Interesting choice of word. You were drowning while wearing a $14,700 dress from Bergdorf and posting about gratitude. The line went quiet. I continued, voice even. "Here is what will happen. You will stop all contact with my bank, my doctors, and my attorney. You will withdraw the appeal within 10 days, and you will repay every cent you reclassified as a loan, with the interest you yourself calculated. Only then will I consider speaking to you again." I heard Derek in the background murmuring something sharp. Cassie's tone changed. The tears dried up. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us struggle after everything we did for you." I laughed once, softly. "Everything you did for me. That's rich. Name one thing, Cassandra. One single thing you ever did for me that didn't come with an invoice attached." She hung up. The click echoed in the quiet house like a starting gun. The next morning I met Margaret Whitlock at a cafe halfway between New Hampshire and Boston. She arrived with a leather portfolio and the calm efficiency I had always admired. "Ellie, the Centurion statements are worse than I thought," she said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. "Over 1.2 million in charges in the last 48 months alone. Private jets, art auctions, a content house renovation in the Hamptons that was never disclosed on her tax returns. And here's the interesting part. Several large cash advances were wired directly to an LLC controlled by Derek. Shell company. Offshore flavor." I turned the drive over in my fingers. "Can we trace it?" "Already did. The forensic accountant is building the chain. We'll have it ready for the appeal hearing." I nodded. "Good, because they're not going to stop at the appeal." Margaret studied me. "You look different. Calmer." "I am calm," I said. "I spent 40 years managing risk. This is just another portfolio. Only the asset is my dignity."
She smiled faintly.
Most people would be screaming by now.
Most people didn't watch their only child sign their name to a document calling them senile. We spent the next hour reviewing strategy. Cut the credit cards. Change every password. Notify the trust custodian in writing that any future distribution requests must come directly from me with wet ink signature. Freeze the small joint account that still had Cassie's name on it for emergency use only. When I drove home that afternoon, the snow had thickened. My tires left clean tracks on the empty road. I passed the turnoff to the old family cabin we used to rent when Cassie was little. The memory tried to surface, soft and dangerous. I pushed it down. Back at the house, I lit a fire and opened a new spreadsheet titled Phase 2. Columns for every asset, every liability, every potential point of attack. I calculated the monthly burn rate for Cassie and Derek based on their visible lifestyle. $42,000 at minimum.
Without my subsidies, they had perhaps 4 months before the wolves started circling their own creditors. I highlighted that number in red. On day 32 after the hearing, the appeal was formally withdrawn. Richard called with the news. They folded faster than expected.
The judge's clerk sounded almost amused.
Apparently your daughter's attorney advised them the sanctions motion had teeth.
I stood on the dock, phone to my ear, watching a pair of loons dive for fish. What now?
Now we wait. But Ellie, they're not done.
People like this don't accept no. They regroup. I already knew that. 2 nights later, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. A screenshot of a new YouTube video titled, "When Family Turns Against You, My Heartbreaking Truth," posted by Cassie 30 minutes earlier.
The thumbnail showed her with red-rimmed eyes, looking fragile and brave. I didn't watch it. I forwarded the link to Richard with one line: document everything. The following morning, Lila showed up unannounced. She stood on my porch in an oversized coat, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes uncertain.
Grandma?
She said when I opened the door. Can I come in? Just for a minute? I let her inside, but didn't offer tea. She sat on the edge of the sofa, twisting her hands. Mom's really upset. She says you're punishing her for trying to help. She says you changed after Grandpa died.
That you're not the same person.
I looked at my granddaughter. She had Cassie's cheekbones and Derek's calculating eyes. Lila, how much is your tuition this semester? She blinked.
34,000. Why?
And who paid it?
You did. Through the trust.
I nodded. Correct. And how much did your mother contribute? Lila looked away. She said she would, but the penthouse fell through. Exactly, I said. Your mother is very good at promising other people's money. I am no longer willing to be the source of that money. Lila's voice cracked.
But she's my mom. And you're my grandma. We're supposed to be family.
Family, I repeated. The word tasted metallic. Family doesn't file court papers to steal your home. Family doesn't lie on the internet about you.
Family doesn't keep secret ledgers charging interest on birthday checks. I walked to the sideboard and picked up a small silver frame. Inside was a photo of Cassie at 8 years old, missing 2 front teeth, holding a fish she had caught in this very lake. I set it face down. Lila, I love you.
But love without boundaries becomes a noose. I am cutting the rope. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on terms that don't involve cash transfers or guilt trips. Otherwise, you know where the door is. She cried then, real tears, the kind that come from confusion rather than performance.
I handed her a tissue, but didn't hug her. When she left, the house felt heavier. That night I sat by the fire and reviewed the latest bank alert. A $9,400 charge on the old joint account I had forgotten to close. A family emergency withdrawal initiated by Cassie 2 days earlier. I picked up the phone and called the bank. "Close it," I said. "Effective immediately, and flag any future attempts as fraudulent." The representative hesitated. "Ma'am, your daughter is still listed as an authorized signer." "Not anymore," I replied. "Send the confirmation in writing, and overnight a new set of cards to my address only." I hung up. Outside, the snow fell harder. The lake had begun to freeze at the edges, thin sheets of ice creeping inward like judgment. I poured myself a single measure of scotch and raised the glass toward the dark window. "To boundaries," I whispered. But even as the warmth spread through my chest, I knew the real storm was still gathering. Because the next envelope that arrived 3 days later wasn't from a process server. It was from the Internal Revenue Service. And the letter inside accused me of improper gifting and potential tax fraud on transfers exceeding $4 million over 2 decades. The return address was a P.O. box in Boston. The handwriting on the envelope belonged to my daughter. I opened it slowly, heart steady, mind already calculating the next move. What I found inside would change everything. The letter from the Internal Revenue Service was typed on official stationery, but the envelope had been hand-addressed in Cassie's looping script. I recognized it instantly. The postmark was Boston, 3 days old. I slid it open at the kitchen counter and read the first paragraph twice. "Dear Ms. Eleanor Voss, we have received information suggesting that certain gifts and transfers made to related parties between 2005 and 2025 may not have been properly reported on your gift tax returns. The aggregate amount in question exceeds $4.1 million. You are required to provide complete documentation within 30 days or face penalties and interest totaling an estimated $1.2 million. Attached was a summary sheet. Every transfer I had ever made to Cassie and Derek was listed with dates, amounts, and a neat column labeled Unreported Gifts, Potential Fraud. The handwriting in the margins matched the envelope. My daughter had not simply forwarded the letter. She had manufactured the complaint. I set the pages down. My hands did not shake. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed Richard Langford's direct line. "Ellie," he answered on the second ring. "I was about to call you. We just received notice of a new filing, IRS audit trigger." "I have the letter," I said. "It's from her." "She wrote the envelope herself." A pause. "That's bold and stupid. We can prove it. I'll have a forensic handwriting expert on standby by tomorrow. In the meantime, do not respond to the IRS directly. Route everything through me." I walked to the study and scanned the letter, then emailed it to him. "Done? What's the exposure?" "None, if we fight it. You filed Form 709 for every taxable gift over the annual exclusion. I have the copies, but the audit itself will tie up your accounts for months. That's what they want. Freeze you in place while they circle." I stared at the lake through the frost-laced window. "Then we unfreeze them first." That afternoon, I drove to the trust custodian's office in Manchester. Mr. Hargrove, the senior fiduciary, met me in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the river. I placed the IRS letter on the table beside the original trust agreement. "I want every distribution paused," I said. "Effective immediately. No wires, no checks, no credit card authorizations until further notice. And I want written confirmation sent to Cassandra Voss Harrington and Derek Harrington that any future request will be treated as a breach of fiduciary duty." Hargrove adjusted his glasses. "That's a significant step, Eleanor.
The trust allows you full discretion, but they may claim duress. Let them claim, I replied. I have 3 independent medical reports saying I am of sound mind. I also have 20 years of bank statements proving they treated my generosity as an entitlement. Send the letter today. Certified mail.
And copy their attorney. He nodded once. It will be done by close of business. On the drive home, the snow began again, soft and relentless. I stopped at the small post office and mailed a notice to the bank canceling the last remaining joint account. The manager had already prepared the paperwork. I signed with a steady hand. Effective tomorrow, Cassie's name would vanish from every ledger I controlled. The house was dark when I returned. I turned on only the kitchen light and made tea. The kettle's whistle sounded like a warning. At 7:15, the headlights swept across the driveway. The black Range Rover again. This time, they brought Lila. I watched from the window as the 3 of them climbed out, shoulders hunched against the cold. Cassie carried a bottle of wine like a peace offering. Derek had his lawyer's briefcase. Lila looked miserable. I opened the door before they could knock. "Mom," Cassie began, voice pitched for sympathy. "We got the trust notice. We need to talk." I stepped aside. They filed in, stamping snow from their boots on the mat I had bought the year Cassie graduated college. The same mat. We stood in the living room. No one sat. Derek set the briefcase on the coffee table. "Eleanor, this has gone far enough. The IRS letter is serious. If you don't cooperate, they could lien the house. We're offering to handle the audit for you. We have a tax attorney who specializes in these matters." I looked at the bottle in Cassie's hands. Chateau Margaux, 1998, the year I paid for your wedding. How thoughtful. Cassie's smile faltered. "It's an olive branch. We're family." "Family," I repeated. The word felt smaller every time I said it. "Your olive branch arrived inside an IRS envelope you addressed yourself. I recognize your handwriting, Cassandra. The same handwriting that reclassified my gifts as loans with 5% interest." Derek's jaw tightened. "That's irrelevant."
The audit is real now. We can make it go away if you just sign the voluntary conservatorship we prepared. It's simpler. No more court. No more embarrassment. Lila shifted from foot to foot. "Grandma, please. Mom's been crying for days. The YouTube comments are brutal.
People are calling her a liar." I turned to my granddaughter. Then perhaps she should stop lying on camera. Cassie set the wine bottle down hard. "You're destroying us. The penthouse deal collapsed. Derek's firm put him on leave pending the audit. We have $42,000 in monthly expenses and no cushion because you cut everything off. Lila's spring tuition is due in 14 days. $34,000. Are you really going to let your own granddaughter drop out over pride?" I walked to the sideboard and picked up the silver frame again, the one with 8-year-old Cassie holding the fish. I turned it face up this time so they could see it. "Pride," I said quietly. "I paid for that fishing rod.
I paid for every lesson, every camp, every car, every apartment. I paid for the wedding, the honeymoon, the down payments, the private schools, the content creation studio, the wellness retreats. And in return, I received a petition declaring me incompetent and a forged IRS complaint." Derek stepped closer. His cologne was expensive and sharp. "Be reasonable, Eleanor. We can settle this quietly. Transfer the house into a joint trust tonight. We'll give you a life estate. You keep living here. We handle the bills. Everyone wins." I met his eyes. "A life estate? How generous.
I die, you sell. I live longer than you expect. You wait like vultures. No. Cassie's mask cracked. You're heartless. After everything we did, name one thing. I cut in. My voice stayed low, almost gentle. One single thing you ever did for me that cost you money or time or pride. I'm waiting. Silence stretched. Lila stared at the floor. Derek's knuckles whitened on the briefcase handle. Cassie's eyes filled with tears, but this time they looked real. You're going to regret this. I have 400,000 subscribers. One video and the whole internet will know what kind of mother you really are. Cold, controlling, ungrateful. I smiled then, a small, cold curve of the lips. Do it. Post the video. Make sure you include the Centurion card statements, the 47,000 Tulum trip, the 23,000 ring light and wardrobe, the 19,500 bracelet you bought the week you told me your joint account was overdrawn. I have copies. I'll send them to every commenter who calls me heartless. Derek grabbed Cassie's arm. We're leaving. This isn't productive. They moved toward the door. Lila lingered a half-second longer, eyes pleading. I did not hug her. I simply held the door open. As the Range Rover backed out, Cassie lowered her window. Snow swirled in. You'll fold, she called. You always do. The taillights disappeared down the lane. I closed the door and locked it. Then I walked to the study, opened the safe, and removed the thick binder labeled Centurion, 2018 to present. I flipped to the page with the 47,000 Tulum charges and highlighted them in red. Next to it I wrote today's date and the word Exhibit A. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A link to Cassie's new video, already live. The title, When Your Own Mother Chooses Money Over Family. I did not watch it. I forwarded the link to Margaret Whitlock with 3 words, full takedown package. Then I sat at the desk and opened a fresh spreadsheet. Title, Counter Audit Preparation. I listed every gift, every Form 709 filing, every canceled check. The numbers filled the screen like armor. At 11 o'clock, the house was quiet except for the low crackle of the dying fire. I poured a single scotch and carried it to the window. The lake was a black mirror under fresh snow. I raised the glass. To the next move. But even as the warmth hit my throat, my phone lit up again. This time it was Richard. I answered on speaker. Ellie, bad news. The IRS has issued a formal summons. They want you in Boston next week for an in-person interview. And they've copied Cassandra on the notice. She's listed as a witness. I set the glass down. Perfect, I said, because now I had them exactly where I wanted them. I opened the new envelope that arrived by courier at dawn the next morning. Inside were the first discovery requests from Cassie's tax attorney. 27 pages of demands for every financial record I owned. I read the cover letter slowly. It was signed by Derek's firm's general counsel. What I found inside would change everything. The courier had left the envelope on the porch before the sun cleared the trees. I brought it inside with the morning coffee and spread the 27 pages across the kitchen island like a map of enemy territory. Every line was a demand. Produce all bank statements from 2004 forward, all trust documents, all gift tax filings, all correspondence with the trust custodian, all medical records from the last 5 years. The cover letter was signed by Derek's firm's general counsel, a man I had never met but whose hourly rate I could guess to the dollar. Attached was the IRS summons. Boston, Next Thursday, 10 a.m. sharp. Cassandra Voss Harrington listed as a material witness. I read it once.
Then I photographed every page and emailed the set to Richard and Margaret. My phone rang 30 seconds later. Richard's voice was clipped. "They're fishing. The discovery is overbroad and punitive. We'll move to quash most of it. But the IRS interview is real. They want you on record." "I'll be there," I said. "Book the conference room at your Boston office for Wednesday afternoon. Bring the forensic accountant. I want every number weaponized." I spent the next 4 days turning the house into a war room. I pulled every file box from the basement. I scanned, indexed, and cross-referenced until my eyes burned. The spreadsheets grew. One tracked every dollar I had ever given them. Another tracked every luxury charge on the Centurion card. A third listed Derek's Shell LLC transactions that Margaret had traced to the Cayman Islands. $680,000 in consulting fees, funneled through the same entity that received cash advances from my card. On Tuesday evening, Lila appeared again. She came alone this time, no Range Rover, no parents, just a backpack and red eyes. "Grandma, I saw the summons," she said at the door. "Mom says the IRS could take everything if you don't cooperate. She says you're forcing her to testify against you." I let her in, but kept the chain on until the last second. We stood in the hallway. "Testify," I repeated. "Interesting word. Your mother manufactured the complaint." She addressed the envelope. "I have the handwriting analysis." Lila's shoulders slumped. "She told me it was just to get your attention, that you'd come around." I walked to the study and returned with a single sheet. It was a printout of the Centurion statement from last March. $9,400 cash advance. Posted the same day, Derek's firm wired money to the offshore LLC. "Attention," I said. "This is what your mother calls attention. $34,000 for your tuition is due in 9 days. I have already paid it directly to NYU, in writing. No one else touches it, ever." Lila stared at the page. "Mom said you canceled it. Mom lies when the numbers don't suit her." I handed her the receipt. "Show her this. Tell her the next time she uses my name with the IRS, I will file a formal fraud referral. With evidence." Lila took the paper like it might burn her. "You're really doing this? Cutting us off completely?" "I'm not cutting you off," I said. My voice stayed level. "I'm refusing to be robbed. There's a difference." She left without another word. I watched her walk down the snowy drive until the trees swallowed her. Wednesday morning, I drove to Boston. The city felt colder than New Hampshire, sharper. Richard's office overlooked the harbor. Margaret and the forensic accountant, a quiet woman named Dr. Patel, waited with 3 laptops open. We rehearsed for 6 hours. I answered every possible question they could throw at me. When had I last seen my daughter? When had I executed the last gift tax return? Why had I paused trust distributions? Each answer was short, factual, backed by a binder tab. Dr. Patel slid a new report across the table. "The offshore trail is clean. Derek's LLC received $1.14 million from your Centurion advances between 2021 and 2025. None of it appears on their joint tax returns. The IRS will love that." Richard tapped the summons. "They expect you to be flustered. Be ice. Let the numbers speak." That night, I stayed in a small hotel near the courthouse. I ordered room service I barely touched and reviewed the binders one last time. At 2 a.m., my phone lit up. A text from Cassie. No words, just a screenshot of her latest YouTube video analytics. Title:
Mom's IRS nightmare. The truth she doesn't want you to hear. Views, 412,000. Comments flooded with outrage at the greedy mother. I set the phone face down, then I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. Title: Defamation Tracking. I copied the video URL, the view count, and every comment that mentioned my name. Exhibit B for the countersuit I would file the moment the IRS interview ended. Thursday morning arrived gray and sharp. I wore the same charcoal pantsuit from the first hearing. Pearls. No emotion on my face. The IRS conference room smelled of burnt coffee and fluorescent light. The examiner was a man in his 50s with a mustache and tired eyes. Cassie sat at the far end of the table, flanked by her tax attorney. Derek had not come. Smart. He knew the offshore trail led straight to him. The examiner began with basics: name, address, relationship to the witness. Then the questions turned. Ms. Voss, did you make unreported gifts exceeding the annual exclusion? I slid the first binder forward. All reportable gifts were filed on Form 709. Here are the copies, stamped by the IRS. Cassie shifted. Her attorney whispered something. Were any of these transfers loans? The examiner asked. I looked directly at my daughter. No, they were gifts. My daughter reclassified them as loans in her personal ledger. Here is her own spreadsheet. 5% compounded interest. She charged me for money I gave her. I passed the page. Cassie's face went pale under the makeup. The examiner flipped through the documents. His eyebrows rose. And the Centurion card? I opened the second binder. All charges were authorized by me. However, $1.14 million was routed through an LLC controlled by my son-in-law. None of those funds were reported as income. I have the wire confirmations. Cassie's attorney objected. The examiner overruled him. We went on for 90 minutes. Every question met with paper. Every lie met with proof. Cassie was called to speak twice. Both times her answers were vague, then contradictory. The examiner's notepad filled with neat black ink. At the end, he closed the file. Thank you, Ms. Voss. We will review and advise. I stood. Cassie stood too. For a moment we faced each other across the table. Mom, she said, voice low so only I could hear. You just buried us. I adjusted my cuff. You buried yourselves. I simply provided the shovel. I walked out. Richard was waiting in the hallway. He didn't smile. He never did when the meter was running, but his eyes held quiet approval. Patel already sent the offshore package to the IRS Criminal Division, he said. They'll open a file by Monday. I nodded once. Good. The drive back to New Hampshire took 3 hours. Snow had begun again. I stopped at the bank in town and signed the final paperwork, closing every remaining joint account. Then I met with the property manager and instructed him to change the locks on the lake house the following week, just in case. That night the house was silent except for the wind off the lake. I sat by the fire with a single scotch and opened my laptop one last time. Cassie had posted another video. Live. Title: Emergency Family Meeting. We're losing everything because of one woman. I didn't watch. I simply forwarded the link to my new defamation attorney in Manchester with the note, add to the complaint. I closed the laptop and stared at the flames. The IRS had the numbers now. The offshore trail. The forged complaint. The reclassified loans. But Cassie still had one card left. I felt it in my bones. The next morning, the doorbell rang at 7. A process server again. Different man, same polite smile. He handed me a thick envelope from the Suffolk County Probate Court. Inside was a new petition. This time, Derek was the sole petitioner.
He sought to have the trust declared invalid on grounds of undue influence and mental incompetence. Attached was an affidavit from Lila. She claimed I had threatened to cut her tuition unless she sided against her mother. I read the affidavit twice. The signature was hers, the handwriting shaky.
I set the papers down. The lake outside was frozen solid now. One thin crack ran across the ice like a fault line. I picked up the phone and dialed Richard. "They used Lila," I said when he answered. "They made my granddaughter lie under oath." His voice stayed steady. "We'll destroy the affidavit." "But Allie, this one goes to trial. 6 months minimum." I looked at the petition again. Page 7 listed the relief they sought. Immediate appointment of Derek as special trustee. Full control of the $4.7 million. Sale of the lake house within 90 days. I opened the envelope slowly, the one containing Lila's sworn statement and the new court seal. What I found inside would change everything. The affidavit was typed in crisp 12-point font, but the signature at the bottom belonged to my 19-year-old granddaughter, Lila Harrington. Her handwriting wobbled on the final letters, the way it used to when she forged my name on permission slips in middle school. I read the sworn statement 3 times, each word landing like a quiet blade. I, Lila Harrington, affirm that my grandmother, Eleanor Voss, has repeatedly threatened to withhold payment for my NYU tuition unless I publicly sided against my mother, Cassandra Voss Harrington. She has exhibited controlling behavior, including freezing family trust distributions and isolating herself from family communications. I believe she is no longer capable of managing the trust in the best interests of the beneficiaries. Best interests. The phrase sat on the page like a bad joke. I set the petition down on the kitchen island and stared at the frozen lake beyond the window. The crack in the ice had widened overnight, a jagged black line running toward the center. I did not cry. I did not call Lila. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed Richard Langford at 7:45 in the morning. "Ellie," he answered, already in his office. "I saw the new filing hit the docket at 6. Derek's move, using the granddaughter as a new low." "Low," I repeated. "That's one word for it." The tuition payment cleared NYU's account yesterday morning. $34,000, wired directly. I have the confirmation. She signed this 2 days ago. Richard exhaled. "We'll get a rebuttal affidavit from the university bursar within 24 hours. But the probate judge assigned is new, conservative. He may order a temporary special trustee pending trial. 6 months of hearings at minimum." I walked to the study and opened the safe. The original trust agreement felt heavy in my hands. "Then we make those 6 months expensive. I want a motion to disqualify Derek as any potential trustee. Conflict of interest, self-dealing, the offshore LLC receipts, all of it." "Already drafting," he said. "Margaret is pulling the latest bank statements on the joint accounts you closed. She found something. 3 unauthorized attempts to withdraw $40,000 each last week. The bank flagged them as suspicious. Cassie tried using an old routing number. I smiled without warmth. Add that to the fraud referral. And schedule a meeting with the trust custodian for tomorrow. I'm changing the beneficiary language. Lila stays in, but only if she completes an independent financial literacy course and signs a no-contact clause with her parents regarding trust matters." Richard paused. "That's aggressive." "It's necessary," I said. "They weaponized my granddaughter." "I'm removing the weapon. The rest of the morning disappeared into numbers. I sat at the dining table with fresh statements spread like a deck of cards. Total transfers to Cassie and Derek since 2005, 4,312,000. Interest they had secretly charged me in their private ledger, 1,087,000.
Combined legal fees they had incurred so far in this war, 187,000 and climbing. Their monthly burn rate, based on visible lifestyle and the frozen cards, 41,800. Cash on hand after the penthouse deal collapsed, less than 94,000. I highlighted the final figure in red. 4 months until their creditors started calling. Maybe 5 if they sold the Range Rover. At noon, Margaret arrived with a courier bag of new discovery. We sat by the fire and reviewed the offshore trail again. The Cayman LLC had received another 220,000 in wire transfers from the Centurion card in the last quarter alone. None reported. The IRS Criminal Division had acknowledged receipt of our package. A case number now existed. 26-CR-4782.
They'll want to interview Derek soon, Margaret said, tapping the folder. We can time our motion to coincide, make it look like the government is already circling. I nodded. Perfect. That afternoon, I drove to Manchester for the meeting with the trust custodian.
Mr. Hargrove looked uncomfortable in his wool suit. He had received the new petition, too. Eleanor, they're asking for an emergency hearing next week. The judge may freeze distributions again until a guardian ad litem is appointed for the trust. I slid my motion across the desk. File this today. Disqualification of Derek Harrington. Request for sanctions. And prepare a full accounting of every distribution made in the last decade. I want copies sent to the IRS examiner who interviewed me. Hargrove adjusted his glasses. This could get very public. It already is, I said. My daughter has 400,000 subscribers watching her cry on camera. Let them watch the numbers instead. I left the office with a new set of documents. The sky had darkened to slate. Snow began to fall in heavy, silent flakes. When I pulled into the driveway, the Range Rover was there again. This time only Cassie and Lila waited on the porch. No Derek, no briefcase. Cassie held a small gift bag like a shield. Lila wouldn't meet my eyes. I parked but left the engine running. I did not invite them inside. Mom, Cassie started, voice soft and rehearsed.
We saw the new motion. You're trying to cut Lila out of the trust. She's devastated.
I looked at my granddaughter. Lila signed an affidavit saying I threatened her tuition, the same tuition I paid in full 2 days ago, direct wire. Receipt available. Lila's cheeks flushed.
Grandma, they made me. Mom said if I didn't sign, the IRS would come after me too. For the gifts. Cassie stepped forward. It's not like that. We're trying to protect the family money.
Derek's attorney says the trust can be restructured so everyone gets something. You keep the house for life. Lila gets her tuition paid through graduation. We get enough to stabilize. No more court. No more videos. I cut the engine. The sudden silence pressed in. No more videos, I echoed. Interesting. Your latest one has 600,000 views. The comments call me a monster. You never mentioned the 1.14 million in unreported cash advances, or the interest you charged me on birthday checks. Cassie's eyes flashed, the honey drained away. You're enjoying this, watching us scramble, after everything we gave up for you. Gave up, I said. The words tasted metallic. Name one sacrifice, Cassandra.
One time you chose my comfort over your own. I'm still waiting. Lila spoke then, voice small. Grandma, please. I didn't want to sign it. Mom said you'd understand. That this is what families do when someone gets difficult. Difficult. The word hung between us like smoke. I looked at the gift bag in Cassie's hand. What's inside? She offered it. A peace offering. Lila picked it out. Cashmere throw for the lake house.
We thought. I took the bag and dropped it onto the snowy porch steps. The tissue paper split open. A soft gray blanket tumbled down, price tag still attached. $380. Take it back, I said. I don't accept gifts with strings or affidavits. Cassie's face hardened. You'll lose, Mom. The judge will see you're isolating yourself, refusing help. Derek has a psychologist ready to testify. Lila will stand by her statement. Lila looked like she might be sick. I stepped closer to my daughter, close enough to see the fine lines she covered with expensive serum. You used your own child as a pawn in a sworn document to steal from me. That is not family. That is predation. My voice never rose. It didn't need to. Cassie grabbed Lila's arm. Come on, she's gone cold. We'll see her in court. They walked back to the Range Rover. Tires spun on the fresh snow before catching. I watched the taillights disappear down the lane until the trees swallowed them. Inside the house, the fire had died to embers. I rebuilt it slowly, log by log, the way I had rebuilt my life after my husband died. Methodical, unhurried. Then I sat at the desk and opened the latest spreadsheet. Title, Trial Preparation Phase 1. I listed every exhibit, every witness, every dollar. The numbers filled 4 pages. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A screenshot of the probate court calendar. Emergency hearing scheduled for next Thursday. Petitioner, Derek Harrington. Relief sought. Immediate appointment of special trustee and sale of lake house. Attached was a new document. A psychological evaluation draft. Unsigned, but clearly prepared at Derek's firm's request. It described me as exhibiting paranoid ideation and financial fixation inconsistent with prior behavior. I forwarded it to Richard with one line. Exhibit C. Destroy it in open court. Then I poured a single scotch and carried it to the window. The lake was black under fresh snow. The crack in the ice had reached the far shore now, a clean fracture running the entire length. I raised the glass toward the dark water. The real fracture had only just begun, because the next morning, a second courier arrived before I had finished my coffee. This one carried a thick envelope from the New Hampshire Attorney General's office. Elder Financial Exploitation Division. An official investigation had been opened based on a complaint filed by Cassandra Voss Harrington. The cover letter listed me as the subject. I opened it slowly, the seal cracking under my thumb. What I found inside would change everything. The envelope from the New Hampshire Attorney General's office was thinner than the court petitions, but it carried more weight. Elder Financial Exploitation, case number 26-ELD-319. Subject, Eleanor Voss. Complainant, Cassandra Voss Harrington. Allegation, undue influence and self-dealing in the management of a $4.7 million trust. I read the cover letter at the kitchen counter while the coffee grew cold. The investigator assigned was a woman named Claire Ramirez. She wanted a voluntary interview in Concord next Tuesday. No attorneys present for the initial meeting, though I could bring documents. Cassie had attached a 30-page summary of
concerns, complete with screenshots from her YouTube videos and copies of the frozen trust notices. I set the letter down. My hands stayed steady. I had expected this. People like Cassie didn't stop at probate court. They went shopping for new venues. I called Richard at 8 sharp.
The AG's office. They opened a file based on her complaint.
Interview scheduled for Tuesday. He was quiet for half a second. That's their standard move after a family tips them off. It's civil for now, but it can turn criminal if they find smoke. We'll treat it like a deposition. I'll prep you tomorrow. Bring every trust ledger, every email, every wire confirmation.
I already have them boxed, I said. And Richard, Cassie copied the YouTube links. She's turning this into content. He exhaled. We'll note it for the defamation suit. The views are at 700,000 now.
Her latest post calls you a trust fund hoarder. I smiled without humor.
Add the ad revenue to the damages. She's monetizing her own fraud.
The next 4 days became a blur of preparation. I drove to Concord once to meet the trust custodian again.
Mr. Hargrove handed me the latest accounting printout. $4,712,000 in liquid assets, down $3,400 from last month's maintenance and taxes I had paid personally. No distributions, no leaks. Mrs. Voss, he said, voice low. The AG investigator called me yesterday, asked about your decision to pause everything. I told her it was within your sole discretion as trustee. I nodded. Good. Tell her the same thing on Tuesday, with the numbers.
Back home, I reviewed the offshore LLC documents one more time.
The latest wire Margaret had traced. $87,000 from the Centurion card routed through Derek's shell company 2 weeks before the first petition was filed, labeled Family Relocation Consulting. The Cayman bank statements showed the money sitting untouched. They hadn't even spent it yet. They were saving it for the day they thought they would control the trust. On Monday evening, Lila appeared at the door, alone. No coat this time, just a hoodie and snow in her hair. Her eyes were swollen. "Grandma, the AG called me too," she said before I could speak. "They want me to give a statement. Mom told me to say you threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't drop the affidavit."
I led her inside, but kept the door open behind her. Cold air followed her in. "Did you?" I asked. Lila looked at the floor. "I haven't answered yet. Mom says if I don't, she'll stop paying my phone bill. But you already paid my tuition. I don't know who to believe anymore." I walked to the desk and pulled out the NYU confirmation email. I printed it and handed it to her. $34,000 cleared, direct from my personal account. No trust money touched. Your mother has nothing to do with it. Lila stared at the paper. "She said you were lying about that." "Your mother lies when the spreadsheet doesn't balance," I said. My voice stayed even. "The AG investigator will ask you questions under oath. Tell the truth, or don't come to me again." She wiped her eyes. "I hate this. I just wanted the family to stay together." "Together," I repeated. That word used to mean something. Now it means my signature on a check. Lila left without hugging me. I watched her walk down the drive until the trees took her. Then I added her name to the witness list for our side. Truth was the only leverage left. Tuesday morning, I drove to Concord in the same charcoal pantsuit. The AG's office was a plain government building with beige walls and weak coffee. Investigator Ramirez met me in a small conference room. She was 40, sharp-eyed, with a notebook already open. "Ms. Voss," she began, "this is not an accusation. It's an inquiry. Your daughter claims you are isolating yourself and withholding funds from rightful beneficiaries."
I placed the first binder on the table. Here's the trust document.
Sole trustee authority. Here are 20 years of distributions, $4.3 million given freely. Here is my daughter's private ledger reclassifying every gift as a 5% loan. I slid each page across. Ramirez flipped slowly. Her pen moved faster.
And the Centurion card? She asked. I opened the second binder. 1.14 million in charges routed to an LLC controlled by my son-in-law. None reported as income. Bank statements attached. IRS case number already open. Ramirez's eyebrows lifted. Your daughter mentioned cognitive concerns. I slid the 3 medical evaluations forward. 98th percentile, all independent, dated after the first petition. The interview lasted 90 minutes. I answered every question with paper. No emotion, no elaboration. When it ended, Ramirez closed her notebook. Thank you, Ms. Voss. We'll review and may follow up. In the meantime, the trust remains under your control. I stood. One more thing. My daughter has posted 7 videos about this matter. Combined views exceed 1 million.
She earns approximately $40,000 a month in ad revenue while claiming poverty in court. Ramirez made a note. We'll look into that too. I drove home through fresh snow. The lake was still frozen, the crack now a wide fissure running the length of the cove. I parked and walked straight to the study. Richard had left a voicemail. The probate hearing had been moved up, Thursday morning. Derek's attorney was pushing for an immediate special trustee appointment. I opened a new spreadsheet. Title: A G Response Package. I copied every document from the interview. Then I added the latest YouTube analytics Margaret had pulled. 41,200 in estimated earnings last month alone. Monetized on my back. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on speaker. Mom? Cassie said. Her voice was raw, no honey left. The AG called me after your interview. They said the case may close if I drop the complaint. Please, just tell them it's a misunderstanding. We can still fix this. I stared at the fire. A misunderstanding. Like the affidavit you forced Lila to sign? Like the IRS letter you addressed in your own handwriting? She started crying. Real this time. And closer. We're going to lose the apartment. Derek's firm froze his draws. Lila's scared. I'm scared. I let the silence stretch. Scared is a word you taught me when you signed the first petition. You wanted my house then. You want it now. The numbers don't lie, Cassandra. $42,000 a month in expenses, $94,000 in cash. 4 months left. I heard Derek in the background, voice sharp and low. Cassie's tone hardened. You're bluffing. The judge will see you're vindictive. We have new affidavits from my followers, people who watch the videos. They'll testify you sound unstable. I laughed once, soft. Testify on YouTube comments. Perfect. I hung up. The fire crackled. I added the call duration to the defamation log. 43 seconds. Exhibit D. Thursday morning arrived with a clear sky and sub-zero air. I drove to the probate courthouse in Manchester. Richard met me on the steps. The AG sent a courtesy letter to the judge. They're monitoring. No findings yet, but the file stays open. We entered the courtroom. Derek sat at the petitioner's table, polished and confident, Cassie beside him, Lila in the back row, eyes down. The judge, older and sterner than the last, called the case.
Derek's attorney rose first.
He spoke of isolation, withheld funds, best interests of the family. He asked for Derek as special trustee and an order to sell the lake house within 60 days. Richard stood. He presented the offshore LLC receipts, the unreported income, the Centurion trail, the medical reports, the AG inquiry. Each document projected on the screen like evidence at a trial. The judge's face remained neutral, but his pen moved constantly. When Richard finished, the judge looked at Derek. "Mr. Harrington, you have a conflict of interest the size of the Cayman Islands. Motion for special trustee denied. The trust remains under Ms. Voss's sole control. Hearing on the validity of the trust itself will be scheduled in 90 days. Court adjourned." The gavel sounded. Derek's face stayed blank, but his hands clenched white. Cassie stared at me across the room, eyes burning. I gathered my coat and walked out. In the hallway, Richard shook my hand. "We bought 90 days. The AG file is still open, but they're leaning our way." I nodded. "Good." Outside, the air tasted clean. I drove home slowly, the frozen lake waiting like a promise. That evening, I sat by the fire with a single scotch. My phone buzzed once, a text from Lila. 3 words. I told the truth. I did not reply. The house was quiet. The numbers were winning, but I knew Cassie still had one last card. The doorbell rang at 9 p.m., a courier in a dark jacket. He handed me a thick envelope from the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. Criminal referral. Elder financial exploitation. Cross-filed with the IRS. I opened the envelope slowly, the seal breaking with a soft rip. What I found inside would change everything. The envelope from the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office cracked open under my thumb like thin ice. Inside were 12 pages of formal language and one devastating line. A criminal complaint has been received alleging elder financial exploitation by Eleanor Voss against her daughter, Cassandra Voss Harrington, and son-in-law, Derek Harrington. The matter has been cross-referred to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and the New Hampshire Attorney General's Elder Exploitation Unit. They had done it. They had flipped the script one last time. Cassie had signed the complaint herself. Derek had notarized it. The attached summary listed every dollar I had ever withheld as theft from rightful beneficiaries, and every pause in distributions as abuse of trust authority. They even attached screenshots of my last 3 YouTube responses where I had declined to comment. Victim's refusal to engage, the complaint called it. I read it twice. Then I set the pages down, walked to the study, and opened the safe. The thick binder labeled Counterattack, Final Package, waited exactly where I had left it. 247 pages. Every wire. Every offshore receipt. Every reclassified loan. Every cent of ad revenue Cassie had earned while crying on camera. I called Richard at 9:15. He answered on the first ring. "Ellie, I just got the referral notice electronically. They went nuclear." "I have the hard copy," I said. My voice was steel. "File everything today. Defamation suit in Suffolk County for $10 million. Fraud referral to the IRS on their unreported income. Motion for a permanent restraining order barring all contact with me, the trust, or the lake house. And request an emergency hearing on sanctions against both of them for bad faith filings." Richard didn't hesitate. "I'll have the complaint served by courier before noon tomorrow. Margaret is already pulling the latest YouTube earnings report. 1.2 million views on the last video alone. Estimated revenue, $58,000 last month." I looked out at the frozen lake.
The fissure had widened into a channel of black water. Good. Add that to the damages, and tell the DA's office I will meet them voluntarily next week, with every document they could ever want. The rest of the day moved like clockwork. I drove to Manchester and handed the full package to the AG investigator Ramirez in person. She flipped through the first 20 pages and stopped at the Cayman LLC statements.
Miss Voss, she said quietly, this is no longer an inquiry. This is now an active criminal investigation. Against them. I nodded once. I know. That evening, the Range Rover returned for the last time. Cassie, Derek, and Lila climbed out together.
They stood on the porch under the security light I had installed 2 weeks earlier. I opened the door, but left the storm door locked between us. "Mom," Cassie said. Her voice cracked on the first word. "The DA called. They said you're the one under investigation now. Please.
Just drop the countersuits. We'll withdraw everything. We'll sign whatever you want." I looked at Derek. His expensive coat looked too big on him suddenly. "You filed a criminal complaint against me. You dragged your own daughter into it. And now you want mercy?" Derek cleared his throat. "Eleanor, the offshore stuff is a misunderstanding. We can explain the LLC. It was for tax planning. We'll pay it back, every cent." I smiled. The expression felt foreign on my face. $1.14 million, plus interest at the rate you charged me. 5% compounded. That comes to $1,872,000, due immediately. Lila stepped forward. Her eyes were wide and frightened. "Grandma, I told the AG the truth yesterday. I told them Mom made me sign the affidavit. I told them everything." Cassie whirled on her. "Lila, shut up." I unlocked the storm door and handed Lila a single sheet through the gap. "Your new trust amendment. You remain a beneficiary, but only after you complete a court-ordered financial literacy program and agree to no contact with your parents regarding any trust matters for 5 years. Sign it or walk away." Lila took the paper with shaking fingers. Derek's face flushed. "You're destroying your own family." I met his eyes. "No, I am protecting what is left of it. From you." Cassie pressed her palm against the glass. "Mom, we're broke. The firm put Derek on unpaid leave." "The bank is threatening foreclosure on the apartment. Lila's next semester is due in 21 days. $42,000. We have nothing." I looked at the three of them. Once I would have reached for my checkbook. Once I would have fixed it. Instead, I said, "The restraining order will be served tomorrow, effective immediately. Any further contact, any further video, any further filing, and the DA will have the evidence they need to indict." Cassie's hand dropped. Tears ran down her face, but this time they were silent. Derek pulled her back. "This isn't over." I closed the door. The next morning, the courier arrived at 8. He served the defamation complaint and the restraining order on Cassie and Derek at their Boston apartment. I received confirmation by text. Served. Signed. At 10, I sat with Richard in his office while he filed the final motion in probate court. Request for full dismissal of their trust challenge with prejudice and attorney fees of $280,000 to be paid by the petitioners personally. The judge's clerk called back within the hour. Emergency hearing granted for next Tuesday. The AG's office had sent a letter of support. I drove home through the melting snow. The lake was breaking up. Chunks of ice floated free, crashing against the dock in the wind. I poured the last of the scotch and raised the glass to the window. The numbers had spoken.
The law had answered. But I knew one more envelope was coming, the final one. Because the DA's office had requested my presence in Boston on Friday, not as a subject, as a witness. I opened the new email from Richard at 11 p.m. Attached was the latest filing from Derek's attorney, a desperate last motion asking the court to stay all proceedings pending a psychiatric evaluation of me. I read it once. Then I forwarded it to the DA with one line. Exhibit 47. The reply came at midnight, a single sentence from the assistant district attorney. Ms. Voss, based on the evidence provided, we are opening a formal criminal investigation into Cassandra Voss Harrington and Derek Harrington for wire fraud, tax evasion, and elder exploitation. We expect indictments within 30 days. I closed the laptop. The house was quiet except for the lake ice groaning in the distance. I opened the final envelope from the DA's office that arrived by special delivery at dawn. Inside was the formal notice of investigation against my daughter and son-in-law, along with a subpoena for every document I owned. What I found inside would change everything. The formal notice from the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office sat on my kitchen island like a loaded gun. It confirmed what Richard had already told me. Criminal investigation opened. Targets: Cassandra Voss Harrington and Derek Harrington. Charges under consideration: wire fraud, tax evasion, elder financial exploitation. I drove to Boston on Friday morning. The DA's office was a sterile building downtown, all gray carpet and buzzing fluorescent lights. Assistant District Attorney Elena Morales met me in a windowless conference room. She was 45, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Two investigators sat beside her with laptops open. Ms. Voss, she said, shaking my hand once. Thank you for coming voluntarily. We've reviewed the package your attorney sent. It's comprehensive. I placed the final binder on the table. 247 pages. Tabbed, indexed, color-coded. Everything is here, I said. Wire confirmations, Centurion statements, the Cayman LLC bank records, my daughter's private ledger charging me 5% interest on gifts, YouTube earnings reports showing $58,000 last month while they claimed poverty in probate court, the forged IRS complaint with her handwriting analysis. Morales flipped to the first tab. Her eyebrows rose. The offshore trail alone is $220,000 in unreported cash advances routed through Derek's shell company, none declared on their joint returns. One of the investigators whistled low. And the reclassified loans? She charged her own mother interest on birthday money. I sat back. $4.3 million transferred over 20 years. Not one repaid. Then they filed to declare me incompetent so they could take the remaining $4.7 million and sell my house. Morales closed the binder.
We're moving fast. Grand jury next week. We expect indictments within 30 days. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years. Tax evasion, another 5. Elder exploitation adds civil forfeiture of any assets gained through the scheme. I nodded once. No triumph in my voice. Just facts. Good. The probate hearing is Tuesday. Their motion for special trustee is still live. I want this investigation noted on the record. She slid a single sheet across. Consider it done. We'll send a letter of support to the judge. And Ms. Voss, your daughter and son-in-law have been served with preservation orders. Their phones, computers, and financials are now subject to seizure. I stood. Perfect. The drive back to New Hampshire took 3 hours. The lake was almost free of ice now, only thin shards left floating like broken promises. I parked and walked straight to the study. Richard called while I was still taking off my coat. Ellie, The DA's letter just hit the probate docket. The judge moved the hearing to Monday morning, 9 sharp. They know it's over. I poured a single scotch. I'll be there. Monday came cold and clear.
I wore the charcoal pantsuit again. Pearls. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and desperation. Derek and Cassie sat at the petitioner's table, faces pale under the lights. Lila was absent. Smart girl. She had already emailed me her signed trust amendment at 6 a.m. The judge entered.
No pleasantries. Petitioners, he said, you have asked for a special trustee and immediate sale of the respondent's lake house. The court has received a letter from the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office.
It states that both petitioners are under active criminal investigation for elder financial exploitation related to the very assets at issue here. Derek's attorney stood, his voice cracked on the first word. Your Honor, those allegations are baseless.
We intend to fight them vigorously. Richard rose next. He didn't raise his voice. He simply projected the first slide. The Cayman LLC wire of $87,000. Baseless, Richard repeated. Here's the trail. Here are the unreported earnings.
Here are the YouTube analytics showing $58,000 in ad revenue, while petitioners claimed inability to pay legal fees. And here is the handwriting expert's report on the forged IRS complaint. Page after page, numbers only, no shouting, no drama. Cassie's face went white. Derek stared straight ahead, jaw locked. The judge leaned forward.
Mr. Harrington, did you control an LLC that received cash advances from your mother-in-law's credit card without reporting them as income? Derek opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The judge turned to Cassie.
Miss Harrington, did you file a complaint with the IRS using your own handwriting while claiming your mother was mentally unfit?
Cassie's lips moved.
We were trying to protect her.
The judge's gavel came down hard. The motion for special trustee is denied.
The petition to invalidate the trust is dismissed with prejudice. Petitioners are ordered to pay respondents' attorney fees in the amount of $280,000 within 30 days. Further, the court recommends that the district attorney's office expedite its review.
This matter is closed. Silence filled the room like ice water. Cassie started crying, real tears, the kind that come when the numbers finally refuse to lie. Derek reached for her hand. She pulled away. I stood. I didn't look at them. I simply gathered my coat and walked out. In the hallway, Richard shook my hand. It's over, Ellie. The restraining order is permanent. The criminal case will take months, but they're finished. I nodded. The house stays mine. The trust stays mine. The money stays mine. Outside, the air tasted clean for the first time in months.
I drove home slowly. The lake glittered under a pale sun. No ice left, just open water. That evening, I sat on the dock with a cup of Earl Grey. My phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. Cassie. 3 words. We have nothing left. I deleted it. The sun dipped behind the pines. I raised the cup toward the water. Then the doorbell rang inside the house. A courier again. I walked back slowly, boots crunching on the last patches of snow. He handed me a thick envelope from the New Hampshire Attorney General's office. Final disposition of their elder exploitation inquiry. I opened it slowly, the seal breaking with a soft snap. What I found inside would change everything. The letter from the New Hampshire Attorney General's office was short and final. 3 paragraphs, no fluff. The inquiry against me was closed with a finding of no wrongdoing.
The file against Cassandra Voss Harrington and Derek Harrington had been referred for criminal prosecution. Recommended charges: wire fraud, tax evasion, and elder financial exploitation. Their assets were now subject to immediate freeze pending grand jury review. The letter was copied to the Suffolk County District Attorney and the probate court. I read it once at the kitchen island. Then I set it down and poured Earl Grey. The steam rose steady. Outside, the lake lay open and calm. No ice left to hide behind. Richard called at 9:20. "Ellie, the AG letter just hit the docket. The probate judge issued a final order this morning. Your trust is untouchable. Their motion for sanctions against you was denied, and the DA's office confirmed the grand jury returned indictments at 8 a.m. 12 counts. Combined exposure, up to 37 years. I took a slow sip. Numbers? Cassie's YouTube channel has been seized for forfeiture. Estimated ad revenue laundered through the LLC, $187,000. Derek's firm placed him on administrative leave without pay. Their Boston apartment is under lien for unpaid legal fees of $280,000. The Range Rover was repossessed yesterday at 9:45 a.m. I set the cup down. Perfect. He paused. They've been served, both of them, at their apartment. Lila was there. She called my office an hour ago. She wants to meet you. Alone. I looked at the lake. Tell her the dock at 4 p.m. No parents, no attorneys, just her. The afternoon passed in quiet calculation. I opened the final spreadsheet. Title: Total Recovery. $4.3 million given away. $1.14 million routed offshore. $280,000 in attorney fees now owed to me personally, plus the defamation damages we would claim. $2 million minimum once the criminal case concluded. At 4 o'clock sharp, Lila walked down the dock. No makeup, no designer coat, just jeans and a plain sweater. She stopped 6 feet away, as if the restraining order applied to her, too. "Grandma," she said. Her voice was small. "Mom and Dad were served this morning. The DA said they can't contact you. Ever. Mom started screaming at the process server. Dad just sat on the floor." I didn't invite her to sit. I stayed standing, hands in the pockets of my cashmere cardigan. "And you?" Lila swallowed. "I told the grand jury everything yesterday. The affidavit, the videos, how they made me sign. The AG investigator said my testimony helped. They're going after the LLC first. They froze the Cayman account at 10 this morning. $1.14 million. Gone." I nodded once. "The trust amendment you signed is now active. You remain a beneficiary, but the first distribution is tied to the financial literacy course. 6 weeks. Online. Paid by you. No more wires from me until you finish." Lila's eyes filled. "I understand. I'm dropping out of NYU for this semester. I got a job at the campus bookstore, 22 hours a week. It pays $940 a month. I'll figure the rest out." I studied her face. No calculation left, just exhaustion. "Good. That's the first honest number I've heard from this family in 20 years. She shifted her weight. "Mom asked me to give you this." She held out a single folded sheet. "It's a handwritten apology. She said she'd drop all appeals if you'd just pay the attorney fees one last time. $312,000 total now, including interest." I took the paper without opening it. Then I tore it in half, then in half again. The pieces fluttered onto the dock and blew into the water. "Tell her the answer is no," I said. My voice stayed even. Tell her the restraining order is permanent.
Tell her the next time her name appears in any filing connected to me, my attorney will move for contempt and the DA will add obstruction of justice. Lila wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She's going to prison, isn't she?
Possibly, I replied. The plea deal they're offering requires full restitution, $4.3 million plus penalties. They don't have it. They never did. She looked out at the lake for a long moment.
I used to think you were the mean one. Now I see it was always them. Using you.
Smiling for the camera while they kept their own ledger. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Lila took one step back. Thank you for the tuition last semester. I won't ask for more. Not until I earn it. She turned and walked up the path. I watched until the trees swallowed her.
Then I picked up the torn apology and dropped the pieces into the lake. They sank without a sound. That night I sat by the fire with the final scotch. My phone stayed silent. No texts, no videos, no more envelopes from process servers. The house felt larger, quieter. Mine.
Richard emailed at 9:30. The DA had scheduled the arraignment for next month. Cassie and Derek would appear together. Bail set at $1 million each, cash only. They had already listed the apartment for a quick sale. Asking price, $2.4 million.
Estimated net after liens, negative $87,000. I closed the laptop. The numbers had done their work. Cold, clean, irreversible. I stood at the window and watched the moon rise over the open water. No more cracks, just calm. But at 11:15 the doorbell rang. One last time.
A single courier, Federal Express, overnight from the Suffolk County Clerk's office. I signed for the envelope. Thick, heavy. The return address carried the official seal of the criminal court. I opened it slowly, the flap tearing with a clean rip. Inside were the formal indictments. 12 counts. Names in bold. Cassandra Voss Harrington. Derek Harrington. And one additional line at the bottom. A civil forfeiture notice attached to any future inheritance or distribution from my trust. I read the final paragraph twice. Then I smiled. A small, cold curve of the lips. They had tried to take everything. Now the court had taken their future instead. I set the papers down and walked back to the window. The lake reflected the moon like a mirror. What I found inside that envelope would change everything.
The final envelope from the Suffolk County Clerk's office lay open on the oak table. 12 counts of indictment stared back at me in black and white. Cassandra Voss Harrington. Derek Harrington. Wire fraud, tax evasion, elder financial exploitation.
Forfeiture of all assets gained through the scheme. I read the last paragraph once more. The court finds probable cause that the defendants engaged in a deliberate pattern of financial abuse against the victim, Eleanor Voss, over a power of more than 20 years. 20 years. I closed the folder and walked to the dock. The lake was perfectly still under the morning light. No wind, no ice, just clear, deep water reflecting the sky. I had kept every promise I ever made to my daughter. Security, opportunity, love without conditions. She had answered with a petition, a forged complaint, and a public smear campaign that earned her $58,000 in ad revenue while she called me heartless. Now the numbers had spoken louder than any scream ever could. 2 weeks later, the arraignment took place in Boston. I did not attend. Richard sent me the transcript.
Cassie appeared in a plain black dress, no makeup, eyes swollen. Derek stood beside her in a suit that suddenly looked too large. The judge set bail at $1 million each, cash only. They had exactly $87,000 between them after the liens. They could not post it. Cassie was taken into custody that afternoon. Derek followed the next morning when his firm officially terminated him. I sat by the fire that night with the final bank statement. The trust balance, $4,712,000, untouched. The lake house, still mine. The restraining order, permanent. Lila called once. I answered. Grandma, she said quietly. Mom asked me to tell you she's sorry. She said she'll plead guilty if you'll just help with bail. I looked at the flames.
Tell her the answer remains no. The only thing I will help with now is the truth. Lila was silent for a long moment.
I finished the financial literacy course yesterday. I got a full-time job in the city, $2,800 a month. I won't ask you for anything else.
Good, I said.
When you've saved enough for your own place, we can talk about the trust again, on my terms.
She didn't argue. The months that followed moved with quiet precision. The criminal case unfolded exactly as the numbers predicted. Cassie and Derek accepted plea deals to avoid trial.
Restitution ordered, $4.3 million plus penalties. They had nothing left to give. The court placed liens on every future asset they might ever own. Their YouTube channel was permanently demonetized and seized. The comments that once called me a monster slowly turned into questions about where the money had gone. I never watched another video. 1 year later, I sat on the same dock with a fresh cup of Earl Grey. The lake sparkled under late summer sun. A single loon called across the water. My phone stayed silent. No more process servers. No more tearful calls. No more envelopes that could change everything. Because everything had already changed. I had given everything once. They had tried to take the rest. In the end, the only thing they succeeded in taking was their own future. I raised the cup toward the lake and spoke the final words aloud, voice calm and clear. Lies. All lies. The water answered with perfect silence, and for the first time in decades, the house, the trust, and the woman who built them were finally, completely free.